funny enough, when I started using TrainingPeaks and got a legit trainer, I had one of the best years of my career in 2016. Like, I don't want to like bike for 3 or 4 hours a day, you know? And so for me, running was like bang for my buck time wise. I can go out and get a pretty good workout running for an hour. And I decided to sign up for the LA Marathon a couple years ago, and I kind of just got the running bug with marathons. And so I was able to, I didn't qualify for Boston my first year, but I was able to last year, and I made it this year to Boston. So that was a wild experience. I've never ran with that many people before. That was crazy. The tricky part is, and I think people are still figuring it out in our sport, is like, how do you program strength, the fast twitch intervals, and be fresh on the dirt bike? Because if you're not fresh on the dirt bike, that chance of injury is so high. And so I kind of just adopted like a lot of volume and tried to keep the heart rate low and build that aerobic foundation. And then the intensity came on the dirt bike.
Welcome to the TrainingPeaks CoachCast. I'm your host, Dirk Friel. In each episode, we'll sit down with industry experts to discuss coaching methodologies, the latest research, and leading tools for endurance training. Visit trainingpeaks.com for more training and coaching resources. My next guest is Alex Martin, who's a former professional motocross and supercross racer with over a 15-year career on the AMA Pro Circuit. He has achieved over 26 podiums and more than 50 top 5 finishes. After retiring, Alex co-founded Troll Training Coaching Company, where he integrates his motocross experience with endurance training. He has now gotten the running bug. He's signed up for 6 marathons this year. He just completed the Boston Marathon in a time of 2:48, and it was really darn cool to learn about a new sport that's leveraging TrainingPeaks, and hope you learn a thing or two in this really cool and exciting episode. Alex Martin, awesome. Have you on the TrainingPeaks podcast. Really darn cool. This is going to be a unique and exciting interview, so I'm psyched to have you on. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Like we were talking about before we went live, I'm a big fan of the podcast and listening for 4 or 5 years, and
damn,
it's a pleasure to be on.
Wow, awesome. Love it. I love how I don't know, what's cool about this conversation is kind of expansion of like how other sports leverage technology, not just cycling, running, and triathlon. We have a lot of different sports, certainly leveraging TrainingPeaks. Hence, you being this amazing ex-pro, and I'm new to the sport, you know, I haven't followed it all that closely. So motocross, supercross, you know, what did you do? What was your pro career like, and where did you specialize?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I've always been a fan of running, cycling, and triathlon. I ran cross country in high school, and I had a 15-year professional motocross career. I turned pro in 2008. And I just retired in 2022. But it's funny, the crossover, because for me, like most motocross athletes, I would say pretty much all, do some form of running, cycling, skier, rower. Swimming we're not the best swimmers, I will say. But we do a lot of cycling, and a lot of that is just because it's low impact. You know, our sport is really high stress, high demand on the joints. Yeah. But yeah, so I've always been a big fan of TrainingPeaks. I think the first time I downloaded and started using the app was in 2016.
Nice.
At that time, I was riding for the Star Yamaha, like Rockstar team. And the trainer we had, he was actually from South Africa, Gareth Swanepoel. And he had used it. And I was like, wow, this is great. Because before then, it was just like Excel spreadsheet and just, you know, whatever. So
wow. So it was introduced to you via your team coach.
Correct. Yeah.
On Team Yamaha.
Correct.
I love that story. That's awesome. So how did coaching look? You know, what did that look like as a pro motocross rider? You mentioned running and, you know, comes naturally, but how does it actually benefit you on the bike, on the motor, you know, on the track?
Yeah. So motocross it's a really physically demanding sport in the respect of what we're asked to do on the bike. I think some people that are not familiar with the sport may just think you sit on it. But I mean, for context, I would, you know, throughout my career training 15 to 20 hours a week, and I never once came off the track and wasn't exhausted. You know, and it's a little bit different in that it's not just all about the body though. Like you really have to have the bike set up properly, suspension, engines. There's a lot of different parts for the chassis parts, engine parts that we're constantly fiddling with. I was known to make a clicker change here or a clicker change there, go out and ride and be like, oh, it's way better. Um, but yeah, so it's kind of cool because yeah, there's definitely a lot to it. It's a very complex sport. Um, and like, yeah, going back to the physical side of it, I did a lot of running early on. I would say probably from 2009 to 2013, I was running 30 to 50 miles a week on top of, which may not sound like a lot, I guess, for the running focused crowd, but I guess our bread and butter is the dirt bike, right?
Yep.
And so typically we do 3 to 4 days a week on the dirt bike, and those sessions are like an hour, hour and a half. So it's not crazy, but when you think about like how expensive a dirt bike is, for example, like your average bike you'd get from a dealership is probably $10,000. And then when I was on a factory team, we would be rotating engines every 8 to 10 hours and then complete bikes like every 30 hours.
Tires.
And so it's really financially draining on a person, especially if you're like a privateer. So yeah, we try and optimize our time on the dirt bike essentially.
Yeah. So then this coach would actually give you programming to prepare. Or is there seasonality to it in terms of the physical preparedness within the motocross season?
Yes and no. So it's kind of funny because now being a coach, motocross is, I would say, probably 5 or 10 years behind like cycling and other sports. In terms of, and I feel like now with me owning my own company, Troll Training, we're trying to bring science to the forefront and understanding fast twitch and threshold and VO2 max and strength training and apply all that in a really proper manner. But back in my early days, it was I just trained. I honestly didn't do any strength training for probably the first 5 years of my career. And then funny enough, when I started using TrainingPeaks and got a legit trainer, I had one of the best years of my career in 2016 and had the points lead after the second round and won a couple races that year and finished second in the championship. And a lot of that was just from actually having structured training instead of just showing up to the track and being like, I'm going to ride for an hour today. So like at that year, I really had purpose. Like every time I would show up to the track, I was like, okay, we're going to do a 20-minute warm up, break the track down into sections, and then we'll do 5 2-lappers and a 35-minute moto. And just like understanding that structure helped me a lot. So yeah, and I guess to give you a little brief background, like for Supercross, which is in stadium. So we have 17 Supercrosses. I've raced in like US Bank Stadium and the Angels Stadium in Anaheim, California. So kind of mainly in the US, but our main event for Supercross was 15 minutes plus a lap. And so let's say my max heart rate's about 194. I would be like 188 max for 15 minutes.
Wow.
And then we shift in like so Supercross goes from January to May. And then in the end of May, we would go to outdoors, and our outdoor season is 11 or 12 rounds. And that's much more endurance focused. So you're talking 2 20-minute practice sessions and then 2 35-minute motos, with only about a 45-minute recovery in between those 2 35-minute motos. And so it's funny. It's hard to put it into context for like runners and cyclists and triathletes, because obviously what they do is gnarly, and I really appreciate that. But the physical component of motocross is just another level, because you're exposed to a lot of different rugged terrain and crashes, injuries. I mean, I have 27 broken bones in my body. I think
that was going to be a question.
Yeah. There's a lot of plates and screws still.
Yeah. So if you were to break down the demands of the sport, I, as a coach, go back to the basics. I think endurance, force, and speed. And when I think about speed, that's skills. Obviously you're on the motorbike, like working on skills, but then you have force and endurance. And then above that, you have anaerobic endurance and muscular endurance and power. How would you maybe chart out the ideal motocross racer in terms of physical ability and where you would want to have strong areas versus some others that may not be as necessary?
That's a good question. Well, so I guess first off, the interesting thing is Supercross it's almost like a different sport than motocross.
Okay.
Supercross, being that
So
it's
short.
shorter, it's more
Yep.
intense.
Just
So
like
it's,
anaerobic, like all out,
yeah,
almost max
it's
heart rate.
so like I typically was a little bit lighter, 5 pounds lighter or so. So
Oh,
my VO2 max is a little higher. We did a lot more threshold, a lot more, like I personally benefited from doing more strength and more VO2 max, like fast twitch stuff.
right.
Whereas in outdoors, it's like longer threshold essentially. And
Mm,
so, yeah.
yeah.
And then you typically wanted to have a little bit more fat on you just for staying power in outdoors.
Right. Right.
Um, and so it's different in that respect. You're almost changing the way you train halfway through the season to adjust for both
Wow.
Supercross and motocross.
I mean, that's fascinating. I never thought about having different training protocols or programs for different times of the year within motocross. And
Mhm.
how prevalent is that? Is that like you're discovering that, or this is like, oh yeah, every single top team is on board with this?
I mean, that goes back to the like motocross being kind of behind the other sports,
Yeah.
I will say it. I
Yeah.
mean, I realized it pretty early on, and I mean, I think most
Okay.
people do, but I don't think people necessarily cater their training as well as they could to
Yeah.
Supercross and motocross. I mean, naturally, you set up your training on the dirt bike to where you're not doing 235s on Supercross
Yep.
because you'd probably just die. Like the way the tracks break down, like so we would go to a private Supercross track and you're usually riding with 5 to 10 guys.
Okay.
Um, and just the obviously because we ride on dirt, like the
Yeah.
whoop section, which I don't, are you familiar with
It's
whoop?
just like wah 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 wah.
Yeah, basically I think like 10 or 15 singles in a row. Well, when you hit them every lap, like and they break down really fast, and so they would develop like these cups in them, and so becomes really dangerous. Like the track at lap one may be totally different at lap 15, and
Got it.
so the risk it becomes risk management essentially.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
like 45
Well, you get
minutes
the,
on,
like the grooves in the track start to like build out deeper, deeper.
yeah, essentially like yeah, kickers, like it's basically at the top of a jump face if you have a little
Yeah.
like hiccup. If
Yeah.
you aren't paying attention, you hit that, like boom, you're going over to the bars. And I mean, so
Yeah.
we're 30, 40 feet in the air and you go over the bars. Like I've broken both wrists a couple times just hitting a
Oh man.
kicker.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so, so
Yeah.
yeah, essentially like Supercross, it's really tough to ride more than like an hour on
Mm.
Supercross in one day. Whereas outdoors, you could go up to 2 hours just because the
Yeah.
track is a little bit more manageable.
Okay, so your workouts back then, it sounds like were much more threshold, anaerobic, kind of power based. Was that all via running? Like, how would you split out training between, what different types of endurance workouts would you do versus strength, and like how many days a week?
Yeah, so I'm a big volume guy. I really
Okay.
like volume, and I think it really helped me out a lot. I built myself up to handle 2 or 3 hour bike rides. To be honest, like it's very rare for a motocross or supercross racer to do anything more than 2 hours.
Okay.
I would say the majority of our stuff is 30 minutes to an hour.
It's like diminishing returns if you do a 4 hour bike ride.
Right. Yeah. And the tricky part is, and I think people are still figuring that out in our sport, is like, how do you program strength, the fast twitch intervals, and be fresh on the dirt bike? Because if you're not fresh on
Yeah.
the dirt bike, that chance of injury is so high. And
Yeah.
so I kind of just adopted like a lot of volume and tried to keep the heart rate low and build that aerobic foundation. And then the intensity came on the dirt bike, essentially.
Got it. Okay. Well, it's almost like I also think about going back to basics. There's this concept of do the least amount of the most specific at the right time. So is doing a 4 hour bike ride every single day great for motocross racers? No, it's not, right? It's like, it's that least amount of the most specific. So you have this anaerobic, power kind of component at the right time. So that seasonality between the indoor and the outdoor, did you have this like off season in between that where you could like refresh?
You'd have about a month usually. We would, yeah, because our boot camp would start November 1st. We would go racing January 1st, essentially. And then we would race up until like the first or second weekend of September. And so then you kind of have October to just chill.
Yeah.
And to be honest, like I probably went 15 years where I only took like a week off at most, usually, of like all
Wow.
training. But I usually
Wow.
would keep doing like running and cycling.
Yeah.
And honestly, the older I got in my career, I kind of like would try and take maybe 2 months off and just do cardio, like cardio
Oh,
and
yeah.
strength, and like just
Yeah.
avoid the dirt bike because you just you want to break from it sometimes, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Was there any benefit to mountain biking in terms of like the skills and the dirt that translate over to mountain biking, or was it all road cycling for you?
I honestly, it just depended on geography and where I was
Mm,
living at the time.
yeah.
So we spent a lot of time in California just because that's where the factories are based, like Yamaha,
Okay.
Honda, Kawasaki, Suzuki. Their factories are in Southern California,
Yeah.
and it's actually kind of cool. But there's a area in Corona, like in the mountains, like the foothills, and basically all these teams years ago, probably 30 years ago, they bought all this land up and they built these Supercross tracks like in the hills.
Wow.
And so like on any given November, there'll be like all of the industry is testing in these hills.
Wow.
Um, and so, but yeah, so actually in that area, we did a lot of mountain biking when we were in that
Okay.
area. And honestly, my brother and I, so I have a younger brother that's really good as well. He's a two-time champ in motocross. And him and I trained with Johnny O'Mara for a
Huh.
couple of years. And
Yeah.
he was into the mountain bike thing for a while after, because he used to be a professional racer and then he retired and did the UCI like mountain bike World Cup stuff for a little while. And we did a lot of mountain biking with him. But then I also
Cool.
spent time in Florida and we did more road biking out there.
Yeah. Nice. Now do all the teams have like a coach employed by the team now?
Most teams, I would say, not every team, but most teams do have like a team trainer and they kind of run the kids through
Yeah.
providing structure. Yeah, it
Yeah.
definitely, and that's actually relatively new for our sport.
Hmm. Yeah.
Funny enough, like I would say 10 years ago, teams did not have team trainers.
Yeah. Yeah. I have heard of other South African motocross like coaches that have actually started in motocross and they transitioned over to being cycling coaches. So it's
Yeah.
somewhat what you've done. Like, why do this isn't like a typical story where you're this champion motocross, supercross, racer, 15 years on the circuit, and then you start a coaching company.
Okay.
What was the DNA and the impetus for that?
Yeah, so the last 5 years of my career, my coach was John Wessling, and he's actually from Minnesota too, and so we kind of had that connection. And my parents actually own a track in southeast Minnesota, and we grew up riding
Mm,
together. And so he was actually a team trainer for a team that my brother was a part of. And then basically around 2019, we teamed up, and he coached me the rest of my career. And it was probably around 2020, just because I'd been exposed to other coaches that just weren't uh, maybe intelligent on
uh-huh.
training effectively. And I feel like I had a good base of understanding of like physiology,
Yeah.
strength, and all that stuff, and how to implement it. And some of the coaches I had just were missing the mark. And then when I teamed up with John, we really had a like-minded thought process with
Hmm.
training. And so it was around COVID time, we kind of decided to come up with this online training thing for
Nice.
motocross, which, I mean, as you know, there's a lot of this in running and cycling and triathlon, but in
Yeah.
motocross, like we were the first essentially.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting time because we're seeing more and more sports kind of gravitate towards more structured training. I mean, it's crazy all the kind of like sports out there that are getting on the training peak. So it's really exciting to see
Right.
that. So you decide to retire, go into business with your coach, and launch Troll Training
Yeah.
immediately, or how did that evolve?
Well, so funny enough, yeah, like that's the thing is we named the company Troll Training, and most people probably, if you're not in motocross, you don't understand what that is. But my nickname was Troll,
Okay,
just because I'm 5'4", was 135 pounds. I was just a little guy,
nice.
and so my
You could
buddy,
catch air.
yeah, well, like basically they just called me a troll, and
Yeah,
so I essentially kind of took the nickname, and some of the media people started calling me like Troll Train. And so that just became my nickname in the sport. And
nice,
I would say probably the last 5, 6 years, I was known as Troll Train. And then I started a
nice.
YouTube channel that was called Troll
Huh.
Train. And then my coach and I my coach, John, was just like, hey, we should put an ing on the end of it, call it Troll Training. And
Nice.
so we actually started the company 2 years before I retired.
Okay.
And so I kind of was actually running and operating it while I was still racing for a couple of years. And then when I retired in 2023 was my first year of retirement, we just kind of went head into it.
Nice. So are you 100% only working with motocross, athletes? What kind of clientele do you guys attract or do you pursue?
Yeah, so I feel like this is just such a different podcast from your usual stuff, so it's
Yeah,
kind of funny.
yeah, it's awesome for us.
Yeah, so I mean, I've coached people to the Baja 1000. We have people in the woods that race like hare scrambles, GNCC. We do ATV quad racers. We do snowcross, which is snowmobiles.
Oh,
Like people race
nice.
snowmobiles in the wintertime.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, a lot. Motocross and Supercross is our bread and butter.
yeah,
I would say we have a lot of a vet guy that's working 9 to 5. He's got kids, or and he's just looking for training. Because the thing with our sport is, if you're not fit, you buy this dirt bike and then you go out and you get arm pump and you can't like ride it for more than 2 or 3 laps.
yeah,
And unfortunately, there's a lot of beer guts in our sport at the amateur side. And so
yeah.
for us, it's like, hey, like, get some free training. It's, relatively cheap and you can at least ride your bike for a little longer, you know?
You get 2 or 3 times more enjoyment out of your equipment if you're fit. I have ski buddies that can only last, a couple hours and then they're back at the bar, but I'm ready to keep going.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you get
Yeah.
more fun out of it. Yeah. So is it still you and your former coach, John, or have you expanded the business, more assistants? What's that look like?
Yeah. So also when I retired, like I took up running as a hobby, and
Okay.
John is really into cycling. He's a big cycling guy. So we also do running and cycling as well. And so it's John and I are, we definitely own the company still. And then we have hired a couple guys, Bjorn Larson, who is a gravel guy. He was actually coached by Keegan Swenson last year.
Wow.
So he's our
That's a big
assistant
name in
coach.
gravel. We know that name.
Yeah, yeah, big Keegan fan. But
He's awesome. Yeah.
yes, so Bjorn, he's been one of our main assistant coaches, and then there's another guy in motocross. His name's Will Hahn, and we brought him in last year just to help us with the moto side of things.
Okay.
And then we actually teamed up with this winter Olivia Amber to kind of look into the women's trail running market.
Oh, wow. Awesome. So what do your kind of services look like? Is it all one-to-one? Do you have group training plans? What's your sweet spot in terms of like the service offerings?
So we just kind of operate on a bronze, silver, gold type of
Uh-huh.
structure. And our bronze is essentially a general fitness plan that's designed to get you in shape for the dirt bike. And then the silver and gold is I work with those guys much more one-on-one, and that's essentially I'm reaching out every week. Hey, what are the riding days looking like? What days are you going to ride the dirt bike? And that is a lot of time dictated by the weather and the track conditions. When are you traveling out? It's just much more involved, I guess, at that price point, because I need to know what days they're riding the bike so I can plan like the cardio and the strength and the intervals and all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Sweet. So you mentioned you've taken up running. That's kind of your focus in terms of personal goals right now. And you just
Mhm.
finished the Boston Marathon. Congratulations. That, I
Yeah.
mean, qualifying for it, getting there, getting through it on a stellar day, it sounds like. Tell us about your recent Boston experience.
Yeah, that was awesome. Honestly, I love running. When I retired, I have 2 kids now. My wife and I, we have two under two. So it's been quite a busy last couple of years.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was like,
And
man,
then
I
the
don't,
Boston.
yeah, but I was like, I don't want to like bike for 3 or 4 hours a day, And so for me, running was like bang for my buck time wise. I could go out and get a pretty good workout running for an hour. Um, and I decided to sign up for the LA Marathon a couple years ago, and I kind of just got the running bug with marathons. And so I didn't qualify for Boston my first year, but I was able to last year, and I made it this year to Boston. So that was a wild experience. I've never ran with that many people before. That was crazy.
Yeah. So how was your build up to Boston? Did that go to plan?
For the most part, yeah. I mean, I'm still kind of like trialing error. Like with motocross, I feel like I have it pretty figured out. Whereas like with running, I think my first marathon was like a 2:59, and then so that was in 23, and then I dropped it to 2:50 last year, and then I actually got a 2:45 in Mesa this year, and
Nice.
so I did Mesa in February, maybe about 8 to 10 weeks before Boston. And I'm trying to hover around like 60 to 80 miles a week. I usually
Mm-hmm.
do like one tempo run. I love mile repeats, so maybe I'll do one day of mile repeats, like 5 by a mile, 3-minute rest. And then every other week I'll throw in like a long run of 20 miles, 18 to 20 miles. And I'm still kind of, like I said, like playing around with like, okay, how do I respond better? Like mile repeats or 30-30s or 1 minute on, 1 minute off. Actually, one thing I'm implementing actually after Boston, I think, is just more strength, because I feel like I just feel better. And maybe my running economy is better with strength. So, yeah, it's been fun though for me.
Are you guys leveraging the new strength solution within TrainingPeaks?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I love
Do you have
that.
a strength coach, or who's inputting that?
No, we do it. I actually took a strength and conditioning certification when I was still racing through ISSA. And then my coach, John, that's now my business partner. We do all the strength stuff for our athletes.
Yeah. What other kind of personal run goals do you have ahead of you?
So I'd really like to go. I mean, at this point, I don't really know where my ceiling is. Like, I'm going to kind of stick with that 60 to 80 miles a week. I'd like to be under 240, maybe. I don't know if that'll happen this year, maybe next year.
You did 248 or something in Boston?
So I ran a 248 in Boston, but I'd actually ran a 245 in Mesa 2 months before that.
Okay, which course is harder?
Oh, Boston for sure.
Right. So come on, 3 minutes.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah. No, Boston was tough. I kind of maybe took it for granted. And I feel like my RPE, my perceived exertion for Boston was like a 9 out of 10 for 2 hours and 48 minutes.
Wow. It starts downhill. Did that get away from you, or were you able to like control that downhill pace?
It did actually. And I was kind of thinking about it because like I live in a hilly area, and I figured I wouldn't really train for hills, but I'm kind of kicking myself. I wish I would have, just because you're going downhill and I feel like you're not warmed up, and then you're going downhill for so much of it right away. I didn't feel warmed up until maybe the 10K, like 10K in.
Oh, yeah.
Until I actually felt warmed up. And so, but I feel like I had a lot of muscle damage before I got to that point. So
yeah, that's a difficulty I hear around Boston is, you start out really fast, you go out too fast, and then the Heartbreak Hill area, mile 20 or whatever it is. How did you handle that?
Yeah. So when I was probably about halfway, I was like, this is not going to be good. I feel like I only had a couple miles until the wheels were going to fall off. And so I just tried to keep pounding gels. My go-to right now is probably the SIS beta, and trying to do about 80 grams of carbs an hour. But yeah, it was pretty hot.
Are you carrying all those on you?
Yeah, I have a Nike fuel belt. So I carried, I think, like 5 gels in a little flask with some, I think I had an element packet in there and some SIS mix. So, but yeah, I honestly had a couple tough miles there around Heartbreak Hill, but then I was actually able to recover, and I think my last 2 miles were 6:20 or something. So I was able to finish fairly strong. And I mean, for me, it was just all about the experience. Like I raced for a living and made good money, and I like, now I'm just doing it for fun, and it's like, I just really got the marathon bug. And for me, it was a good learning experience. And like, I'm already excited to go back for Boston next year, hopefully, and try to improve on the time. And yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, you brought up nutrition. Is there any kind of secrets of nutrition within motocross and all these, motorsports? And when you think about like competition, I don't remember what you said. It was like 45-minute window of recovery between races.
Mm-hmm.
Like, did you try and maximize that with nutrition as well?
Yeah. So that's another good point. It's a low-hanging fruit in our sport, is just, like, we've had a lot of athletes that we simply just have them start eating and they get better. And I actually see this more. It's more common with the younger kids in our sport, because unfortunately there's kind of like a weight stigma. So in our sport, like I think it's 8 pounds is the horsepower. And so, especially in the 250 class, like that, or the smaller class, you have 250 and 450. In the 250 class, it really becomes a game of like horsepower. And like the Star Yamaha team that I was telling you I rode for earlier, they're known to have the fastest bike. And most of the people that are in that class are usually probably under 150 pounds. Like, I think when I raced, I was 135 pounds. And
Yeah.
so people are really worried about staying light and lean so they can like get a whole shot. Because that's the other thing is like our sport is so competitive. Like a lot of people are similar in speed. And so it's really important to
Yeah.
get a jump off the gate and get to the first turn first, because essentially you picture like 40 people going into a first turn that's only 20 feet wide. Everybody's
Yeah.
bike is about 50 horsepower, give or take. And so there's a lot of jostling for position. And if you can, basically, it's the only part on the track where you can pass 40 people at one time. And
Right.
so if you can get there first, like it makes your whole moto easy. Whereas if you get to the first turn, like in 15th or 20th, like you're getting roosted. We actually wear tear offs. So we have like between 25 and 30 tear offs. And if you get roosted, you pull a tear off real quick.
Yeah.
Um, but like getting a whole shot versus starting 15th, it's just a totally different experience for your race. So
Yeah. Yeah. And what about the snowmobile racing? What are the different lengths of racing snowmobiles in the winter?
yeah, their sports, they're, I would say, so like an average dirt bike is about 230 pounds, whereas a snowmobile is like 450 pounds. So it's a really heavy machine. And so they don't race quite as long. I think they're like 10
Okay.
minutes, 10 minutes they race for,
Okay.
but they actually do a triple crown format, which it's like 3 10-minute motos. And I think they have like a 30-minute break in between. And so it's
Okay.
honestly just as physically demanding, but it's different in the
Yeah.
sense that they're racing when it's like, 0 degrees outside.
Yeah.
But yeah, it definitely is a full body workout.
I'd love to hear more about the Baja experience. I mean, that's just way out there. I mean, now we're talking endurance, right? I mean, how
Mhm.
long is the Baja, like quads, motos? How long does this take? Are there different distances in Baja?
Yeah. Well, it depends on, there's like a 500 and 1,000, and you can do it on the rally car or you can do it on, yeah, quads or bikes. So there are different stages to it. But for me, it like goes back to the fueling, and kind of like what you were
Yeah.
talking about earlier, like it's a low hanging fruit.
Yeah.
Just understanding like, okay, for me, for example, I'm about 150 pounds. I should be having about 450, 500 grams of carbs the day before the event to carbo load. And then even during it, like how many grams of carbs are you having per hour? How many milligrams of sodium are you having per hour? And for us, just laying that out for the athletes and having like a fueling plan and strategy in place. And then the other thing that becomes tricky is like, how are you going to carry that stuff? Um, so for motocross, it's tough because you can't, like, we do 35 minutes, but we don't fuel during it because you can't just like stop and take a gel.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you really, like you were talking earlier about the 45-minute window between our 235s, like you really have to make sure you eat as much as you can. And I would go down to the start line for our second moto, typically like full, like I'm full, uncomfortable. But I knew like if I could get that food in, that I would be good for the second moto.
Yeah.
So
Well, and then in a Baja type event, hydration, all that fueling on board, is it Camelbacks or bottles or what's that look like?
yeah, a little bit of both. Yeah, Camelbacks mainly.
Yeah.
So for like off-road guys, they like GNCC or hair scrambles, they will do a Camelback and they'll usually route it through their helmet, so they can kind of grab it or whatever mid-race.
Okay.
Yep.
Got it. And I got to ask, are they uploading like heart rate files of the races themselves so you can actually see like the heart rate values in these races? Do you ever see that data? Is that a common thing to upload from Garmin's or anything?
Yeah, that's where it's like for sure. I mean, I uploaded pretty much all my stuff from when I started using TrainingPeaks in 2016
Cool.
through 2022. You could
Yeah.
go back like 5 6 years, and um, I would say you're looking at, like I was saying, my max heart rate's 194. I'm in the upper 180s for that 35 minutes. I
Yeah.
don't know I can't remember off the top of
Wow.
my head what the TSS would be, but
Yeah.
I will say
I mean,
like the TSS that it gave us was not the same as like how smoked I was the day after.
yeah. I mean, TSS is not the golden everything, holy grail. It's just looking at power or heart rate versus
Mhm.
your threshold. But now you have the heat, you have the muscular damage, and all that pounding. I mean,
Mhm.
that just takes so much out of your body that TSS isn't showing you the total expanse of all the load on the body and the stress. But that's so true. Like, and I think that's the value of coaching, right? You have that experience. Mm-hmm. You realize what a recovery window really looks like. But oftentimes the athlete wants to speed up that recovery window, mm-hmm. and it just doesn't work that way. Like, are you ever having to like hold back the athlete and say, no, we need that's a part of the coach's job, right? Is just kind of hold them back as well.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes you're a mental counselor as well.
Absolutely.
Like talking them through, like, hey, it's okay to take a day off, or like it's okay that your form or your fitness isn't where you want it to be. Like, TrainingPeaks doesn't know that you got in a fight with your girlfriend, or you got a hangover the night before, or you slept really bad.
I say that all the time.
Yeah. I'm like, no. Like, this is a great number, but like, you don't have to live and die by it. Like, for example, like, it doesn't know if I broke my arm, right? And so, I definitely find myself being like, it's okay, you can take a day off, your body will absorb the training.
Yeah. You mentioned breaking your arm. I mean, that's probably a big job you have now as a coach is, coming back from injury. You're probably just an expert in that, like the mental side, but then like how to incorporate new and unique, modes of exercise when they do have a broken wrist, right? Like, they can run, but you have to like coach them through like almost like new sports sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a lot of times of where maybe they have like I have a kid right now with a broken thumb, and all he can do is stationary cycle. But then it's also pretty common where you have a broken arm or the other way around, you have a broken leg and all they can do is ski or go rower. We've had times where the kids bring a chair up to the rower and they just sit on the chair and row.
Oh my gosh.
So you do what you can, and I always say that I do think that just the blood flow from exercise is going to help the injury. It's going to help the recovery.
I've even seen studies where if you have one limb broken, if you at least exercise the other limb, it'll benefit the broken limb. Like, just crazy how it will transfer, like even strength. Or have you had any experience with, going off here, but blood flow restriction therapy?
So that's one thing I haven't gotten into. I have heard about like the cross, it's like if you have a broken arm and you're training your left, you can still get a percentage of gains there. Or even like getting in the sauna, like when you're hurt. I think sauna can help kind of keep the fitness going.
I'm all for that.
So I've kind of tried a little bit of everything. I was a big fan of like PMS therapy. What's
that?
So it's like the pulsed magnetic field therapy. Essentially a lot of chiropractors have them, and it's been shown to speed up bone healing by 50%. I would say like the last 10 years of my career, every time I had a broken injury or a broken bone, I would go to a chiropractor and just sit on that thing for an hour a day. And I was able to come back from some pretty serious injuries faster than what the doctors were saying. So,
wow, love it. Back to the sauna. Is heat adaptation, heat training, obviously Baja, you're racing in the deserts, do you have actual training protocols around heat adaptation at all worked in?
Yeah, so that's a good question. In our sport, it's interesting because we don't really have facilities like up in the mountains, so we don't really do any. There's one rider that I know of that's done altitude training, but pretty much all of us live in Florida or Texas or somewhere warm, and so like heat training is definitely a thing that we've been doing for the last at least 10, 15 years. Like I lived in Claremont, Florida, actually for a good 5 years when I was racing for Red Bull KTM, and they had a facility there. And I mean, you're riding the dirt bike most of the days, 95, 100 degrees. And you think about the gear and the helmet and everything you have on, like it's, I mean, I actually brought the scale and I think I lost like 9 or 10 pounds just in like a 3 hour period from riding the dirt bike in that temperature. But I will say like the gains, you had to kind of do it at a certain point because a lot of our races were held in like hot climates, and so those heat adaptations that we got were kind of necessary to being at the highest level.
I mean, I even believe heat adaptation helps you even in cold races because it increases blood plasma volume, and there's like great benefits. It's kind of like the poor man's altitude training, heat training.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're definitely seeing more of that in cycling, triathlon, and a lot of the cycling teams are doing that to prepare for races in Belgium. They're doing heat training. Why? Because it just makes them fitter, But you have to account for that additional stress and maybe lower the volume. But yeah, really interesting.
That brings up a good point. So I kind of realized is if you're going to live in the South, like Florida, so you ride the dirt bike in the heat and you get a lot of heat training there. But then I would also come back and like, instead of going for a bike ride or a run outside, like I'd go in the AC because I was still, you still want to ride or work out after you ride. But I had to kind of be smart about my exposure to the heat, because if you're exposing yourself to it for the morning cardio, riding the dirt bike, and then in the afternoon, and then let's say you hop in the sauna later, it's just like, it's too much.
Yeah. Too much stress.
Yeah. Super
awesome. Where is Troll Training going next? Any kind of big things going on with you guys?
So we're an online based company for the most part. So I would say probably 99% of our athletes are online. But having said that, I do the other side of our business is we do riding schools. So I actually had one last weekend. So we had about 25 riders that came to a track nearby. It's just, 10 to 4 p.m. and it's kind of in-person training, and we go over like techniques and drills. We break the track down into sections and mainly focus on the fundamentals. So for like motocross, it would be like, elbows up, head over the handlebars, get your hips unlocked, tight knees, and then balls of your feet. Those are just some basic fundamentals. And honestly, we see a lot of success with just introducing those fundamentals to athletes of all levels. I mean, I think we had a 68-year-old there last weekend, as well as a kid from Canada that was like 6. So it's kind of like both ends of the spectrum.
Oh, that's fun. It's fun keeping, I guess, in that world of the skills development, on the bike. Yeah. And then the online coaching of like, wow, what's this client, next goal? It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So what's your next running goal?
I'd signed up for a local marathon May 18th in Rochester, Minnesota. And then I'm signed up for So I'm kind of like I'm kind of going big this year. I feel like I'm doing 6 marathons.
Wow.
I've done 2, and then I have one in May nearby, Grandma's, which is in June. And then I want to do Twin Cities in the fall, and then the Madison, Wisconsin marathon.
Yeah.
So, we're...
Dang. Yeah, full time.
Yeah. Like I said, awesome. I got the running bug, so.
Yeah, super cool. Well, hopefully it keeps going. And man, thanks so much for this entertaining, educational interview. I love learning new sports. I love how we can, TrainingPeaks can be leveraged in many different ways. I love hearing that motocross races are being uploaded to TrainingPeaks. I'd love to look at one of those sometime. But yeah, thanks so much for being a customer. Good luck with Troll Training and your personal marathoning. That's such a cool story. Thanks so much.
Yeah, no, awesome. This was a pleasure and awesome to be on here and talk about all things motocross and supercross. And I love the TrainingPeaks app. And I do think that, just the crossover from running and cycling to motocross, they both, really work well with each other. So it was awesome being able to share that.
Thanks a lot, Alex.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the TrainingPeaks CoachCast. Visit trainingpeaks.com for more training and coaching resources.